Hi there, and welcome to my review of the Gevi GrindMaster. The Gevi GrindMaster is Gevi's first foray into prosumer level grinders. Gevi has been around since 2014. They've been producing products in 30 markets globally. You may have seen this grinder in other markets sold as the Barcetta. It's from the same manufacturer. This is a pre-production version that I'm reviewing. It's actually an alpha unit, to which there have been a number of changes. First of all, since it was initially announced in the feature set that it came with, and second of all, through the development, there have been a number of improvements that Gevi has been very responsive in terms of user feedback and has implemented suggestions and recommendations made, which is extremely impressive for a company to do. So if nothing else, I think kudos are certainly well-deserved in that regard. So now that we have that housekeeping out of the way, let's get back to the grinder. What this is a 64 millimeter flat vertical burr grinder, and it has a number of features that make it quite competitive with much more expensive offerings. This is a variable speed, brushless DC motor. It has a 400 watt motor, which makes it one of the most powerful grinders out there, not just in its class, but just in general. This is a single dose grinder, and it has stepless variable adjustment. So it is a full range grinder. It will grind as fine as Turkish coffee, and it will go as coarse as French press and everything in between. Initially, when this grinder was announced, it was initially released in other markets as a 65 step design. So this was a step adjustment. They have since gone to stepless. They've introduced a number of other changes. One of the first things I just want to mention is its design. So if you look at this, this certainly isn't a traditional design. This breaks the typical mold that you've seen for grinders. This is absolutely beautiful. This comes in two color options. What you're looking at right now is frost silver. They also have a deep gray gold color. All of this is deep gray except for this that has a gold accent. So it's quite beautiful. The entire body, it's aluminum. There are a couple of surfaces that are plastic. One of them is the grind adjustment knob, and one of the changes that they've implemented is, first of all, they got rid of this beep that you just heard. So this is the automatic sleep timer that's built in. I believe it times out after about 5 minutes or so. The only other time it beeps is if you're trying to turn it on when you have it disassembled. It's a safety switch that's built in, but there's absolutely no reason for it to beep when it switches off, because when you switch it on or when you change the settings, it has a slight click, but there is no beep. So Gevi actually removed that beep. The other change that they made is they actually made the grind adjustment knob into metal. So they made a metal one that has less play than this has. This is very little play actually, but they improved the feel of this. And they added a plastic coating onto a metal adjuster here. The other thing that's plastic here is the variable speed adjustment knob. So this is the power knob, and it also adjusts the speed of the grinder. So this is variable speed, and it's adjustable from 500 RPM in 100 RPM increments all the way to 1500. Okay, now there are other variable speed adjustment grinders. In its class is the Lagom P64. That one is adjustable from 300 RPM to 1400 RPM, so it has a slightly wider adjustment range. However, it only has a 300 watt DC brushless DC motor. This has a 400 watt one. The other grinder is the Zerno. The Zerno is a 300 watt, but that is fixed at 900 RPM. There's also the Time War Sculptor, and there's a few other ones that I suppose this can be competitive with as well. But having all these features together, it certainly puts it in a class of its own, because it has the absolutely most powerful, one of the most powerful motors that you can get, first of all. Second of all, the grind adjustment mechanism has actually been improved further. So one of the changes that they made to the stepless adjustment is they reduced the thread pitch from 1 millimeter to 0.5 millimeter. Because of that, each grind adjustment notch that you can see here, it's been reduced from 10 microns to 5 microns in the newest unit that's going to be released. So all of that makes this a very impressive package overall. So moving on. One of the other features that is actually quite unique to this is the access to the burrs. So this is completely toolless access. So it's a matter of removing the magnetic cover, unscrewing the metal retainer ring. Once you remove that, the grind adjustment mechanism just comes out. Once you remove that, that gives you access to your burrs right there. So this does have several burr options. The burr option that it comes with is what they call the Orion burrs. These are 64 millimeter, as I mentioned. These are titanium coated. Okay. However, you can choose to option SSP burrs if you would like. They have to be specified when you order them. So there are options available for the full SSP line. So you can get the HU, the high uniformity burrs. You can get the cast lab suite burrs, and you can also get the MPs, the multi-purpose burrs. One caveat is that you have to specify the burr set that you would like when you order them, because even though the burr is easily accessible, it does void the warranty rather if you remove them and change them yourself. So they're certainly easy to do, but just keep that in mind. Hopefully it's something that Gevi does change in the future, but for the time being, that's what it is. Now, what you can see is that this has a auger. Okay, so the auger ensures that when you feed beans into the chute, it doesn't matter if you hot start or if you just dump the beans in, the auger will slow feed the beans into the grind chamber, first of all. Second of all, as you can see right here, there is actually a pre-breaker. So what that means is the auger, as it's feeding the beans into the grind chamber, into the burrs, it will initially break the beans up. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it that much easier for the burrs to actually grind through the beans. Second of all, it has the additional benefit of helping create a uniform size. Third of all, if you dump light roast beans in that are typically, let's say, harder, and you start this off at the lowest grind setting, which is 500 RPM, this does have a soft start, But in the last 2 weeks of having used this, I have yet to stall this. I have put it through its paces. I have used very light roast, and I've had absolutely no issues. On top of that, it actually has a very smart feature that's built in that besides the very powerful brushless DC motor that it actually has a auto backup. So what that means is if it ever senses that the beans have been stuck, what it's going to do is it's going to obviously stop the motor and it's going to reverse it for 2 seconds. And that will allow whatever's stuck in there to clear. It'll give you a chance to back up on your grind settings and it will clear it. But as I mentioned, in the last 2 weeks of using this, I have yet to do that, and I don't see that as happening anytime soon. This is just simply much too powerful, but it's nice to know that that insurance does exist. Okay. The second thing that I want to point out is I didn't have a chance to clean this very well. However, in the last 2 weeks of using this, when I cleaned this out, there's only about half a gram of retention in here. So this is what's known as a 0 or close to 0 retention grinder. There is no bellows in here and there is no knocker. However, there is an anti-static plasma generator in here, and what that means is that it effectively eliminates the static. So in having used this, whether I'm grinding directly into the dosing cup or directly into the portafilter, I don't have static anywhere. It's very clean, and on average the retention that I've seen on this has been maybe somewhere around 0.3 of a gram, so hardly anything at all. It comes with a nice little brush, so you have easy access to other burrs. You can basically clean it out, and you should do that on a fairly regular basis. However, it's been very, very clean. Now, assembling this is actually quite easy because this only goes back in one position. Okay, there is a little metal notch that's in here. Now, what this does is it allows you to actually place this and it locks it in one position. So this is what allows this to go in one way. So there's no way that you could possibly screw it up, first of all. Second of all, going to this grind adjustment mechanism, there's a little button, as you can see here. So when I try and switch this on, it beeps at me and it's not going to allow it to switch on. Now, first of all, when you access your burrs, you should actually switch it off. However, this does have that safety feature that's actually built in. So when you have the grind adjustment mechanism removed, it doesn't allow you to actually switch the grinder on for your safety. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the other adjustment mechanism in here, and because of the way that this goes in one position only, I can actually remove and replace this without changing my grind settings. So when I assemble this back together by putting the retainer ring back in, and I just screw it on, the little dot that you have on here effectively locks it in place. So that's in the required position. And then the cover, the cosmetic cover, again, I just line up the 3 dots and that just clicks in place, right? There is a little bit of play in this one. That is one of the improvements that they've further made into the released version. There's going to be very little play in this, but as you can see, that's actually very easy, and my grind settings were exactly as they were. I didn't change them, nothing changed. I can disassemble it, I can put it back together, and the grind settings are exactly as they are. Okay, so now that we have it together, let's grind some beans. And this is where the scale actually comes in. So the scale, as I mentioned, it is a value add-on. This is an option that you can order with the grinder. You don't have to get it. For those that have a scale already, you probably don't need this. For those that don't have one, you probably should get it, because the fact that the scale is actually fairly responsive, it's nice, it fits the grinder nicely, and it's magnetic. So if nothing else, the scale allows you to hold the cup whichever way, okay, and vice versa. Now the scale itself is actually, it's made out of plastic, okay, and this particular one it does come with a magnetic charging cable. Now the charging cable, it only goes in one way, okay? So it doesn't go this way, it doesn't connect, it only goes in one way. This cable is 60 centimeters. One of the improvements that they made is they, first of all, changed this to a USB-C. Second of all, they made the cable 1 meter. So if you're low on battery, but you want to make a coffee right away, you can actually plug it in and without having to really take it very far from where it is. Okay. That being said, okay, one of the other improvements that they made was actually to the responsiveness of the scale. Now, the scale itself, let's go ahead and dose some beans. It's actually fairly responsive. Okay, so I'm gonna do 18 grams here. It auto tears. And that was actually a lucky dump. There we go. 18.1, let's remove a smaller bean here. There we go, 18, you know what? Let's put it back in there. Okay, so this way we have our 18 grams. So let's go ahead and dump this in. We're gonna set this to 10, just because, like I said, it goes all the way up to 1500 RPM. We're just gonna keep it at 1000 RPM for consistency. And we press this again, and that starts our grind. Okay, so as you can see, tiny little bit of retention here. So we put in 18 grams, we got out 17.8. So that means there's 0.2 grams somewhere in here, but that is absolutely minimal. I can perhaps switch this back on and maybe use my palm a little bit to maybe push some air, a little bit of air through it to get that last little bit of grinds out. As you can see in doing that, I actually got up to 17.9. And I heard the last of the bean come out. So 17.9, we're pretty much there. So without doing anything, there's very little retention on this. Now, in having used this daily for the last 2 weeks, I've noticed on average, I generally get about maybe 0.2, 0.3 grams of retention, which is very, very good, and certainly nothing to complain at. When you saw me open the burrs, I did very little cleaning, so there's very little in there. So in terms of retention, there's hardly any in this. So that being said, that is one way that you can grind. Now, because this does give you a few options, you can either use the dosing cup. Now the dosing cup, it comes with a few dosing rings. Now this specific design is to allow you to fit several different size portafilters. So there is a 51 millimeter ring. There is a 54 millimeter for the Breville and Lab Speciale users out there. Okay, so locks in nicely. Okay, so I can do that. Or let's get that back in there. I can dose into a 58 millimeter basket, okay? And it fits all of them. Now in this case, when I dumped it back in, there's a little bit on the side, but that is one option that you have. The other way that you can do it, as I mentioned, is you can actually just dose directly into, got a little bit of grounds here. You can actually dose directly into the portafilter if that is something that you want to do. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and measure out 18 grams. It auto tears itself. Okay, so we got 18.3. There we go, close enough. I'm not doing any RDT or anything like that. I really don't need to. The point of RDT, Roth droplet technique, is to spray the beans just to eliminate static. Because this has active anti-static control, it's not something that you need to do. So just dump the beans. And just for giggles, I'm gonna turn this all the way up to 15 because at 1500 that should produce more fines. And we'll see exactly how effective the anti-static on this is. Okay, so as you notice, this is actually fairly quiet. So when it's empty, it's quite quiet. So at 1500 RPM, nice, loose grind rather, pretty much no static whatsoever. There might be a little bit on the dosing ring, but it's aluminum, so it gathers static itself, but there's absolutely nothing on here. So the bottom of the chute is plastic. It's absolutely clean. So that is another way that you can dose if you choose to have that option. Now, that is basically it in terms of the features that this offers. There have been a number of changes that they made to the stepless adjustment. It is going to be improved further. There is a little bit of looseness on the grind speed adjustment knob. That is going to be improved actually as well. But otherwise, my impression of this has been very, very solid. It's a very well designed, very well thought out design. It's a very substantial, burly, powerful, clean grinder. And in my experience, in having used this for the last couple of weeks and comparing it to my Turin DF83, I have actually noticed that this does have more clarity, especially at lower RPM. At lower RPM, it's supposed to result in a more uniform grind, less fines, at the cost of maybe some body. Faster grind speed, it does potentially introduce a little bit more fines, and as a result, for an espresso, you do end up getting more body, and that gives you that thicker, more chewy espresso, if you want to call it that. But I have noticed that while maybe a bit slower, this the quality coffee that I got from this has actually been very, very comparable. And in terms of doing a variety of side-by-sides with it, I've been hard pressed to tell the difference, although this has given me a little more acidity, a little more clarity for the most part on my shots. I will be further comparing this to a Zerno, as well as a Option O Lagom P64, as well as maybe a few other grinders for fun later on. And maybe by that time I will have a production version of this, but for the time being, even based on the alpha unit that I have here, I have been extremely impressed. At the Indiegogo pre-launch pricing that you have right now, this is an amazing value for the money. So if you're in the market for a high-end grinder with flat burrs with various burr options that are actually cheaper from Gevi themselves than if you buy them separately, as it turns out. But this is a very solid grinder, so if you're after, if this is your first grinder and you want a grinder that you want to grow with, this is an amazing choice. If you want an additional grinder on your counter for pour over, or a dedicated grinder for whatever reason, this does check all the boxes. So this is certainly something that you should take a closer look at. That being said, thanks very much for your time, and hope to see you next time.